So why are all your favorite content creators shooting on Sony cameras and lenses? Today we're going to be talking about what is arguably the most important thing when it comes to the tools that you use to create your videos. And that is the heart of the entire operation, your camera body. And more specifically, we're going to be talking about the Sony A7S III, because I think out of all of the cameras, this is the most common camera that people use. All creators these days are on the Sony A7S III, and the ones that aren't, it's kind of just a matter of time before they swap. I have a lot to say about this camera. I have a couple of pros and cons and a lot of things that I don't see very many other creators discussing when they make videos about the Sony A7S III. I was on the Sony A7 III for a pretty long time, a couple years, and I only upgraded to this one at the beginning of this year. So I've had a fair amount of time to figure it all out and see what the main crazy things are about it, and I'm going to share that with you guys today. Today's video is sponsored by Sony and Alpha Universe by Sony, which is basically an online learning community for Sony creators. I also have a couple of little like secret hacks, if you will, about the Sony A7S III that I don't see any other creators really mentioning, and I think they make a huge difference when you are using your Sony A7S III to make sure that you are making the most of its potential and putting all of your hard-earned money to good use by making sure that the A7S III is doing exactly what it's capable of doing and you're not lacking in any certain aspects. So when I was debating the upgrade from the A7 III to the A7S III, there were kind of a couple of critical things that convinced me that it was a good idea, because it's a lot of extra money to drop, especially to go from almost a predecessor to this camera to this one. I know it's not directly, but it is essentially like a very similar camera, and it's a lot more expensive. So how much are you actually getting more than one of the older Sony cameras? Let me tell you about some of the things that I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to the camera store, take my money, I'm upgrading. I need this camera. One of the biggest things, honestly, for me was the upgraded resolution and frame rates that you can get out of this camera. You guys can shoot 4K at 100 FPS. You can shoot S&Q mode and get up to 240 frames per second in 1080p, and that's way higher. It's double than what the A7 III allows you to do. So something huge for me is 4K. Everyone's moved to 4K these days. It's like standard practice to have your content in 4K. And I also like to shoot a lot of slow motion, higher frame rate stuff. So if I wanted to shoot high frame rates with my older camera, I would have to shoot in 1080p. So that was one of the major reasons why I upgraded to this. I can do 4K, super high frame rates, and have nothing to worry about. So that was a huge one for me. Something else super cool is that I like to shoot all my footage in log format. And if you guys have ever tried to shoot in log, you'll see on your screen when you're actually trying to shoot and expose in a tricky situation like this, where you have some really bright highlights but also some shadow, it makes it very difficult because you can't actually see what's going on. With the A7S III, there is a setting that you can set up that is basically a gamma compensation overlay, and you can press a button on the back of your camera, and right now when I'm looking at the screen, even though I'm shooting in log footage, it's actually showing me what it would look like in standard Rec 709. So all my saturation and contrast is up to the point where it would be like once you color grade it, and it makes it really easy to expose compared to just kind of that guessing game of everything being like sort of grayed out and you essentially having no idea what is correctly exposed and what's completely blown out. So Having that makes such a huge difference, and it seems like something small, but if you guys have ever been in like bright sunlight and trying to set your exposure properly, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and that reason alone could be enough to convince you to get a Sony A7S III. So you guys undoubtedly know that I'm a huge Sony fan, and today's video is sponsored by Alpha Universe by Sony. If you're a creator or looking at getting into the creative field, Alpha Universe has a wealth of knowledge and assets that you can benefit from. From podcasts to workshops, tutorials, the latest gear releases and things to come, you can find your favorite creators as ambassadors and see what they are up to, as well as anything they contribute to the community on Alpha Universe. I even have some exclusive content that will be coming out on the platform, so head over and sign up to stay up to date and see any future posts that I will be releasing on there. If you guys want to find out more about a specific topic, they have a bunch of useful tutorials. Maybe you're unsure of the perfect vlogging gear, for example, you can head over to the gear tab and find a bunch of useful videos about vlogging, tutorials about some tips on how to make better vlogs, and any other information that you guys might be seeking. Having in place all things Sony free for creators to use, built by the creator community themselves, is an amazing thing to be a part of. And if you guys want to find out anything more about it, it will all be linked in the top of the description. Head over there, check it out. There's so much useful information that you can benefit from, and it's definitely going to be worth your while. As someone who does like a lot of vloggy style content like this, or just solo filmmaking where I'm filming myself, you guys know where I'm going with this, right? This is going to be the biggest thing. The Sony A7S III has the flip out screen. What else do I need to say about it? I can flip out the screen, I can see myself, I can make sure I'm in frame nicely, I can make sure that my exposure is correct, and I can make sure that everything in the background is what I actually want it to be. So without that flip out screen, I got used to it, and I was doing it without it anyway, and it was fine. But sometimes there'd be little issues, something just slightly out of focus. Right now I can just readjust my exposure a little bit because the sun's on my face. So having that flip out screen is an absolute game changer, not only if you guys are filming yourselves, but also if you are filming anything and you want to get like your camera into weird, like different little angles, maybe it's super high, super low. This swivel screen can flip in any direction, obviously, so it makes a huge difference. And if anything, if I could only pick one extra thing that happened out of this camera, I think it would probably be the flip out screen. So I'm just kind of cruising around where I live in Uluwatu, checking out different little spots. And for those of you guys that don't follow me on Instagram, well, first of all, you should. But second of all, you would have seen that I recently purchased this car, which is so cool and so fun to have, especially here in Bali. Just been driving around, road trips, having the best time with it. But let me tell you guys something else that is like significantly different with this camera to any other camera that I have used, and that is the dual native ISO. So basically what this means is, I'm sure you guys know, you need to keep your ISO as low as possible to make sure that you're not having any noise or weird artifacts in your footage. And when you're in low light situations, you sometimes have to bump it up, especially if your lens is not that fast. But having the dual native ISO means that you have your base ISO if you're in S-Log3, which is 640, but then you can also crank it up to 12,800 and it becomes base all over again. So if you're someone that shoots in a lot of low light situations, maybe like at night or anything, you can pump that up to 12,800 and this camera can pretty much see in the dark. If you want to do any like night shoots, maybe some cityscapes, this is gonna like be an absolute like must. Something else major is that I often shoot on lenses that don't have any image stabilization in the lens. The one I'm shooting on right now, the Sony 20mm f1.8, no in-lens stabilization. So the in-body stabilization that the A7S III has is like really good, and if you are shooting anything like this where I'm just hand holding it, it's gonna take so much of the micro jitter and any of that like weird little wobble out of the shots, and it makes a huge difference. So you can even see with these two shots here, one is with the stabilization off, and you can see you have quite a lot of jitter. I was walking to introduce some movement, and you can see with this other one with the image stabilization turned on, it takes a lot of that away. Side by side, the difference is even more noticeable. So having that in camera, huge difference, especially if you guys are shooting handheld. So here's the thing, at the end of the day, there isn't really any perfect gear, and the better your gear gets, the more expensive it gets. You're getting more features, etc. But with the Sony A7S III, I think they came pretty close to making a perfect camera body. There's nothing crazy that I would change, maybe a few small minor things, but it's pretty perfect. It does exactly what I need it to do. I never feel like the camera is holding me back or inhibiting me from doing anything that I would want to do that I can't, which is pretty crazy, because all other gear that I have and previous gear that I've had, it's always about compromise. Nothing's gonna really be perfect and do everything that you needed to do in the exact way that you wanted to do, but like obviously you can have certain things, more frame rates or like even higher resolution. But aside from that, it's pretty spot on. If you guys are thinking about upgrading, or you even looking at it as one of your first serious cameras, you're not going to be disappointed. And I think the A7S III will hold its own in the coming years, unless Sony drops something like mind-blowing that like blows this out of the water, which personally I don't think is going to happen anytime soon. And I know they come out with
all
certain other cameras,
they are going to be linked in the top of the description.
The A7 III is where it's at, and there's a reason why.
Today's video is
sponsored
by Alpha Universe by Sony. And we're going to
Aside
talk
from
about
that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you the information that you were looking for if you were on the fence or just trying to figure out which camera is best suited to your needs. And remember to check out Alpha Universe. They have so much free information on there. It would be crazy not to like make the most of that. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.